weekend kickstart with Wichita's #1 conservative talk radio host. This is Kansas Talk with Andy Hooser.
We recently sat down as he was doing his tour across the state, and he came here to the city of Wichita. As yesterday, we sat down with Kansas Secretary of State Scott Schwab, getting you ready for Election Day, as we are 1 month away exactly from today from Election Day. And when we chat down with Scott Schwab, this is what he had to say. Scott, what's going on, my friend? How are you?
It's good to see you again. It seems like every election season we come around, we do this, kind of dispel some rumors and make sure folks know what to do. You know, it's like after they vote, they kind of forget about it.
Yeah, well, that is true. And I've been enjoying watching the news headlines of the drama between you and the USPS. Apparently, there's now a beef going on here. So, well done.
It's so frustrating because they say, well, we don't postmark every ballot. Well, your website says you do. And they told my county clerks, like in Douglas County and Riley and some other counties, they said, here's the envelopes we're using for our ballots. Do they meet your specs? And they said, absolutely. We have emails from the post office saying they do.
Right.
Then they don't deliver them. They said, well, it's because your envelopes didn't meet the specs. You can't change the rules after the game starts, man.
Yeah.
And so it gets really, really frustrating. And so a bunch of election officials had a Zoom call with the Postmaster General, and all he did was read his testimony that he read before Congress subcommittee the week before, which we've already heard.
Right.
And so two things I often say is, one, the Pony Express was more efficient. Two, the only thing you're delivering on is excuses.
Right.
And people's ballots should have confidence that these things are going to happen. I always said don't give your ballot to the federal government, but some people kind of have to.
Sure.
Especially if they're not ambulatory and have physical limitations. But don't tell people you're going to do something, then not do it.
Right. Yeah. Well, and with how they're supposed to trust the system to get things where they're supposed to go in a timely manner, I know they just came out after your second letter that you've sent to them. They're now saying that they're approving, quote unquote, extraordinary measures to try and make sure that things are done in a timely manner before the election.
Okay, but that was just a document. Where's the accountability to make sure they actually execute on it? And in there, they said, starting the 21st of October, we'll be checking mailboxes to see if there's mail in there to go out.
Oh, okay.
Aren't you supposed to be doing that anyway?
Yeah,
that's like saying, hey, starting the 21st, we're going to start doing what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Thanks.
Okay. Well, what's wrong with today?
The efficiency of government work, right?
Yeah. It gets frustrating. You have your letter carriers and your postal workers that I just don't think they're being trained.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of miscommunication over there. And when we were visiting with Postmaster General, he wanted our questions beforehand.
Sure.
So he got them the night before. He didn't give us much time to get them. And then he wouldn't read the entire question. For example, the Secretary of State of Oregon asked, we had counties where the postal ballots were just dumped in a county drop box.
Sure.
They need to be postmarked. How come? And when he said, well, that was just a local issue. And we had him said, read the whole question. When asked if it was a local issue, they said it came from the Postmaster General.
Yeah.
So there needs to be some accountability here.
Yeah, accountability with the chain of command and exactly who's doing what and what kind of roles are being done here, which is concerning because, again, this is going to be one of the biggest, we always say this every year, but it's the biggest election of our time right now. We need to make sure it runs smoothly.
We have them close. In the primary back in August in Leavenworth County, someone won a race by 22 votes.
Wow. Yeah,
exactly. Over 100 ballots that were legally cast showed up.
Wow.
3 weeks late. Okay, well, does that change the will of the outcome? Because was the will of the people truly reflected,
right?
Or did government interject itself?
Exactly.
Through omission and through failure. So it's really important that folks know. I know there's a lot of folks that were upset with me because I was an advocate for the secure county drop box, but now see why? Because if you put it in the blue one,
that's right,
your vote's not going to count. But if you put it in the county, it's handled by your neighbor. And It's more secure, too.
It is more secure, yeah. This is an argument against as well is at the Washington level in D.C. that we hear this argument of centralizing the elections at a federal level. I mean, if they can't handle the basic post office to get things done right, then how do we expect that to run efficiently if they take away your job at the state level and give it to the federal government?
Right. So, and I believe in federalism, and the most federalism portion of government that we have is our election system, right down to the county level.
Yeah.
And so, in that way, they can operate within the resources they have, and it's your neighbors that are doing this. This isn't some bureaucrat out of Langley or something. This is somebody who you went to school with, or your kids play football with. they're your neighbors and they want to make sure you're taken care of. Or in some case, and this is the nasty plug, if you want to be a poll worker, it could be you. You too could be a poll worker. We're always advocating for that. But yeah, this is the frustration with it. And, we've been doing mail ballots since the Civil War in Kansas.
Sure.
But it seems like we're not getting better.
Right. That is very true. Speaking of poll workers, do you guys have enough for the upcoming election? Everything going well for this season?
We do. So coming out of the pandemic, a lot of our more tenured poll workers left.
Okay.
And so with that, you lose the institutional knowledge.
Sure.
And that was the biggest hit. Our teenagers, you could be as young as 16 to be a poll worker, really stepped up to the plate.
Nice.
And really proud of the young people across the state of Kansas. Douglas County in 2022 had to turn away 4,000 young people.
Wow.
Because they had too many poll workers.
That's exciting.
Now, that is exciting, but now it's like, but what do they know?
Right.
They haven't been doing this for 15, 16 years like some other poll workers have.
What would be neat is to partner with schools for that and have a lot of the classes of government classes for high schoolers to do that as part of maybe their school curriculum to actually partner up and actually work these. That would be neat.
So now you're softballing me. We already have that program.
I love it.
We've worked with schools to have students serve.
I didn't know that. That's cool.
And what we do is schools say you get paid to not go to school and you still get credit.
Yeah.
So, and you could be as young as 16. Oftentimes, you get a group of friends that do it together. A lot of your civic clubs, like whether it's a Republican or Democrat club in your school. Oftentimes, you got a grandkid that's 17 with a grandma working the poll together, which is really just majestic.
Or college Republicans, college Democrats.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, I tell folks, well, we need Republican eyes to stop fraud. Hey, Democrats, we need Democrat eyes to stop suppression. Whatever your excuse is, I don't care. Go in and get the training.
Whatever the flavor is you're in.
It is,
yeah.
and it looks great on applications for like scholarships and qualified admissions and such.
So. That's amazing. I did not know we had that program. That's really neat.
Yeah, we do. So you can reach out to your government teacher and get a day out of school.
That's exciting.
Now, it doesn't work, obviously, in the August primary because they're not in school generally.
Right.
But we still, once they're in the system, we can still call them and ask if they're willing.
Still a way to be part of that. That's neat. Now, looking at the counties as well and some of the county election offices, are they prepared? I know that here in Sedgwick County especially, I know that we've expanded. We've got more polling sites. So how is that expansion going around the state?
So Laura's doing a great job. And Sedgwick was a bit behind in some of the counties with the number of polling places per person, per voter. And the county commission really, between Ryan Beatty and Pete, they really stepped up to the plate to help that office. And so folks in Wichita, you can go to, and I'm going to make sure I get the website right, votekansas.gov.
Okay.
It doesn't say .gov. It's not from us, so I can't guarantee what's happening with your data.
Gotcha.
But go to votekansas.gov. You can see where your polling places are, what your ballot looks like. If you do an advanced mail ballot, you can track it to see, if they got your application, if they sent your ballot, have they received your ballot. And that way, the only confusion you're going to have in Sedgwick County this year is your polling place may have changed because they have more polling places. The good news is less time it takes to vote. You're going to walk in, you're going to walk out. And Laura really did a great job advocating. And, with the extra election we had with the presidential preference primary earlier, our poll workers got more practice in a low-pressure situation. Yeah. So I'm really excited. I think they're going to do a stellar job. The reports I'm getting outside of the post office, everybody just seems to be working at a very high level.
Good. That's exciting. Speaking of, let's go back to that presidential preference primary. First time we've done that in a while.
Yeah.
Voter turnout, how was that?
Miserable.
Really?
Well, at the time, they had already had their, granted, at the time it was Biden.
But we already kind of knew the candidates.
Yeah, we kind of knew the candidates, and it didn't affect anything. And when you do a presidential preference primary, it's up to the parties to weigh how much influence that has with who their nominee is going to be.
Sure.
So the Democrat Party in Kansas through the presidential preference primary chose Biden. Well, then he dropped out. And they went to the convention and said, Kamala, you get it. Well, we wasted all this money.
Legally weird about that, isn't there?
Actually, no, because there was never a nominee. They
hadn't certified the nominee yet.
There was no nominee. What happens is after the convention, the party sends us a certificate saying, here's our nominee for president.
Right.
Until we get that, there is no nominee. That's why they say presumptive nominee.
Yeah.
Once they had the convention, they had the votes to switch it out with Kamala, and that was completely legal.
Just weird.
It is very weird. It's just a weird time in American politics, but we say that every time. I mean, it's just, if you go all the way back to our founding, it's just we've always been controversial, but we always end up doing okay.
Yeah, that is very true. And again, I've said this before on the radio. I've said this to you many times. Here in Kansas, when it comes to voter integrity laws, when it comes to the transparency, I think we still do better than any. We still have obviously little things that we can always tweak, but we do better here than what most states do. And in fact, a lot of states base their election laws off of what we're doing here in Kansas.
That is true. That's true. And I was the 5th Secretary of State from the state of Kansas to be president of what's called the National Association of Secretaries of State.
Okay.
And the reason why is because Kansas has always had good, steady policy.
Yeah.
When it comes to our election law, we often do not become political. What happened in California, they banned local election voter ID. That's political. If that city wants to have voter ID in Fresno, let them have it. But no, they just don't want to do it. Good portions of California aren't even HAVA compliant, which is a Help American Vote Act, which came out after Bush v. Gore lawsuits. And the person who helped author that is former Secretary of State Ron Thornburg. Yeah. Because he was president of the association then. But yet even now California is not compliant with that, but they still get the funds, which is frustrating.
Sure.
But Kansas, we do great things. Georgia had that massive law change to help solve their problems. Yeah. And what was frustrating is when it happened, Major League Baseball pulled their All-Star game.
Right. Exactly.
And put it in Denver, where they mirrored their law off of. It's
like
you didn't even read it.
You didn't pay attention.
So, but it is kind of nice to be a state like Kansas when people try to drum up controversy. It's just not there because we're run on the local level, and you're not attacking me. Yeah. You're attacking your neighbors if you really think there's an issue.
Exactly. Is there an opportunity to think, I know under Trump and when Chris Kobach was Secretary of State, now Attorney General, but when he was working with the Trump administration then on like an election integrity commission, trying to find voter roll issues and registration issues, obviously it didn't go anywhere. There's a lot of lawsuits kind of blocked it. Do you think there's an opportunity again, either at state or federal levels, to try something like that again, to check voter roll systems and make sure things are running smooth?
This goes back to I don't like the federal solution.
Right.
But we did have an interstate check. Then Claire McCaskill, Paul Pate out of Iowa, Ron Thornburg out of Kansas. I can't remember who the Nebraska secretary was at some time. 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans created cross-check.
Okay.
And other state, it was free. And people could check to see double registrations, maybe even double voting. Well, the ACLU found out about it, and they just started suing, and just ended up killing the program.
Typical.
Yeah, it's frustrating. Well, there was on the other side, there was a program called ERIC.
Okay.
Which was even more robust, but they suddenly said it was George Soros backed. Not true, but the rumor went. States were like...
And killed it.
Yeah, so Florida pulled out. Well, it's how much it costs is based on how many people are in the program. So when Florida pulled out, a lot of states like Iowa and Alabama are like, I can't afford to be in there anymore.
Sure.
And so that really hinders our way of making sure our voter rolls are as clean as they could be.
Sure.
Now there's talk of resurrecting another free one like cross-check with some new technology checks. So we're working with Mike Watson, who's Secretary of State of Mississippi. Great guy.
Yeah.
And trying to create some of that stuff. It'll be helpful.
That would be interesting for sure. I'd like to see that. Is that on the docket maybe, or what's the conversation going into the upcoming legislative session here in Kansas? Are there any election bills or any conversations of what may pop up?
We always have little things that we want to tweak. Well, again, we don't want a drastic change in the voter experience.
Right.
You walk in, you show your ID, they take you over, you vote, you're done.
Yeah.
On the back end, are there things we can do? So normally it's just on the administrative side. And so we're in those conversations now. Like last time, one of the things we did, which really help the workload of our clerks, say if you during a writing campaign, you got to go to the election office and sign an affidavit. That way we don't have to count every ballot that says Bugs Bunny.
Right.
Okay, so those cast out, saves a ton of time, helps us get preliminaries quicker, helps us get ready for the Board of Canvassers quicker. Those are the type of things we look at. And
sure.
I mean, we go back to the 1860s to say, okay, what laws were passed then that are irrelevant now?
And start cleaning things up. Yeah. How is it? I mean, you and I have talked for years, and we've been friends. I mean, when you were a state representative and then all the way up to now being Secretary of State, going from being legislator and actually writing bills and coming up with the ideas there to now being the administrative side, working on the back end, working through that process. What's been that change, or do you like that better?
I like it just as much. Being a policymaker is a ton of fun. Yeah. It really is. I really enjoyed being a chairman. I really enjoyed being Speaker Pro Tem. And just being part of that policy debate, because I was a bit of a policy wonk and being a college debater. Now I do what the legislature tells me to do. And to see how our governmental checks and balances actually work is so fun. Because it's one thing to read about it in a history book when you're a junior in high school. It's another thing to actually experience it.
Sure.
And see, and then I have checks against the legislature. You know, the legislature has a tendency to think, hey, we're king, we're all in charge. Well, yeah, but sometimes you're not. There are still things that you're not in charge
We're the ones that make things happen.
Exactly. Yeah. And we carry out the laws, and we want to carry them out well. But, you know, it helps if you write the laws right.
Right.
So right now, you know, Dan Hawkins is from Wichita. He's Speaker of the House, is really helpful to us. Because I've got the best attorney in our building, Clay Barker. When we start writing laws and going through these things,
right,
Clay really listens. Like, okay, this is what you want to do. Here's a way that we can do it and not get sued.
Right.
Because if you do it this way,
I'm
going to get sued and you're going to have to pay for it.
Gotcha.
And so Dan's office has really, really been good. He's been. I've served with him when he was a freshman in the House, and he's a humble man, and he wants the system and government to work.
Yeah.
And he's been a good partner.
No, in my opinion, we have great leadership. I mean, we have Dan Hawkins as Speaker. We have Ty Masterson in the Senate. And I mean, the fact that those two work really well together, working with you guys, has been really exciting on that front. Last couple of things for you. We're talking with Kansas Secretary of State Scott Schwab. We're doing the tour, letting people know about upcoming election season. But talk about, I mean, right now we're sitting on a $3 billion, I guess, emergency fund for the state. They're doing their tax cuts, doing their thing. The argument from Governor Kelly for years now has been that obviously all the agencies, your office, everybody else's, is running on skin and bones, how no one has any money. We can't cut taxes because obviously we're in such dire straits. From your office particularly, is that true? I mean, are you guys just on skin and bones here?
I will say mine's different because we're fee funded. We're not funded through tax dollars.
Oh, sure.
So when people say, well, you're wasting tax dollars. No, I'm not.
No, you're not.
We are, and our elections are run on the local level. So my agency, we have about 40-some employees. We're not super huge. We are looking at cutting some fees and restructuring because some of our fee funds are just running pretty high.
Okay.
So if we can save,
I've never heard a government agency say that.
Yeah, well, it does happen. Normally it's like sometimes ag does that and different things, but it's just. We want to restructure our filing fees because what takes a ton of time is mergers and acquisitions.
Right.
But we don't charge much for that.
Sure.
When you're doing your which is now a biannual filing, not a filing, annual filing, it's biannual. When you do those, that really doesn't take much time, especially if you do it online.
Right.
So we want to cut that fee for small business owners. And on mergers and acquisitions, when you're buying a $120 million company, you don't care if you have to pay $500 more just for us to do the paperwork and do the checks and balances.
Right.
So we're looking within the statute what we can do to balance that. And, that I really think when it comes to tax policy or even fee policy for businesses, you base it on economics, not what feels good.
Sure.
What's best for the economy long term.
At that time,
and sometimes it's small cuts, sometimes it's big cuts. But you have to make sure you have everything's broad.
Yeah.
So that you can get through the highs and lows of various economic downturns. And then you also want to make sure it's consistent. Because if you're constantly going up, then, I can't remember the economist, but it was a great line. He says, capital goes where it's welcome, and it stays where it's treated fairly.
It's a great
point.
point.
We need to make sure we're treating those who are investing in Kansas fairly.
It's a great point, which leads me to my last question. Are you still seeing growth in small business in the state of Kansas? Are we seeing more registrations?
We're still seeing a lot more filings in new companies. We're still up. I really thought it was going to taper down coming out of the pandemic.
Yeah.
But it's still a high number, and our new system is up and running. There was a little bit of a learning curve because when you have change.
Sure.
But we got all our business filing off the old AS400 computer system. We're working on getting our notaries off it, and hopefully very soon we'll be completely off that system, and I either have to give it to the Historical Society or I get to shoot it with a gun.
Well, there you go.
I hate it.
YouTube video. We want to see that shooting with a gun. Different types of calibers.
Just another
political
commercial, right? Where people shoot guns at things.
That's right. Blowing up computers. I'm okay with that one. It'll be a Hillary Clinton ad. There we go.
There we go.
I like it. The small business, it is good to see the fees actually do that. What we need to do, and I know this is more the legislative side, but get rid of just individual incentives for one particular business to come here, but just make it flat across the board for tax breaks, property taxes, or business taxes, employee tax, and just make it flat for everybody to be enticed here.
It's kind of hard to do that because when you get an opportunity like the Kansas City Chiefs to come to Kansas,
right?
Well, I can't make that offer to a McDonald's franchisee.
Sure.
It's a completely different market. It's different thing. So those are really challenging. But again, it's got to be economic driven, not like it's a shiny thing. Let's take it. So like now, granted, and I was there last Sunday, the NASCAR track,
sure,
bright and shiny.
Right.
I when I worked for Farm Bureau in Wyandotte County, I insured part of that farm.
Okay.
There was nothing there. That farmer was more than happy to sell that farm for the racetrack. And you look out there, we have our first Republican legislator elected in Kansas City, Kansas, since the 1980s.
Sure.
Because of that economic development and is pulling people up.
Right.
So now the racetrack got something a lot of folks didn't get.
Sure.
But everybody ended up winning.
Yeah, that is true.
As long as you base it on economics and not just simply because somebody was nice to me.
Building that growth. That's what it's all about. Get out the vote. It is 1 month away. When does early voting start in the state of Kansas?
Voter registration ends the 15th.
Yes.
So if your name changed, if you're going to be 18 by election day, go ahead and register to vote. If your address changed, you might want to re-register to vote. And then, and this is one people don't think of. My mother-in-law had a stroke, and her signature doesn't look the same.
Sure.
And we match signatures. So if you have a signature change, go ahead and re-register. And then on 16th, early advanced voting starts. And remember, you can go to votekansas.gov to make sure your mail ballot was received and counted if you're doing it that way.
Sure.
But like I always say, voting in person is always the most secure way to make sure your vote gets counted.
It's all happening coming up in a couple of weeks with that early stuff. Secretary of State Scott Schwab. Scott, it's always good to talk to you, my friend. Appreciate it very much as always.
Andy. You have a great week and go vote.
All right, welcome back into it. Kind of short segment here. Bottom of the hour news coming up. When we come back, we'll shift gears a little bit. Congressman Tracy Mann joining us from the Big First District in the state of Kansas. So much to cover, so little time to do it. It's Kansas Talk, Wichita's Big Talker, KQAM. Good Saturday morning. Let's keep it rolling here, right here on KQAM.